Hey everybody, Jessica Green here. I'm substituting today for Jay Edgar, and you're listening to episode 72 of Contemporary. We've got a lot of good headlines for you guys today, first of which Nancy Pelosi and Democrats kneel in contrition to the outrage mob and then struggle to stand back up again. Trump is considering signing legislation to pressure China about the oppression of the Muslim Uyghur population. And also, Harry Potter throws J.K. Rowling under the bus. Talk about biting the hand that feeds you. Thank you for joining me today. I'm going to try my level best to do the best that I can for Edgar while he's on vacation. I know I'm not going to do as good a job as he is, but thank you guys for joining me, and we'll see you in a second. Okay, guys, so the first headline that I'm going to read to you today is about Derek Chauvin, who is the cop who actually is responsible for the death of George Floyd. The way that we're going to talk about his responsibility is kind of going to get played out in the courtroom, and people are going to have to, as the jury, decide whether what he did was justified or not. I would think that most of America at this point is against the idea that what he did was justified, but they still have to put him through these rigors of, due process, because that's something that we still do in this country. So we're going to lay out the evidence and see what the jury decides. So in the first process of due process, you have to be arraigned. And Derek Chauvin appeared, and his bail here was set for $1.25 million in his court appearance in Minneapolis. This is by Doa Madani at NBC News, and she says I assume that was a girl. I don't know if that's true or not. So just Madani, this person Madani writes, former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin is facing murder charges in the fatal arrest of George Floyd. He was granted bail Monday. In his first court appearance, Chauvin is facing second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and manslaughter in George Floyd's death. The former officer appeared in Hennepin County Court, though through video conferencing from prison, wearing an orange jumpsuit and a blue mask. Wonder why he was wearing a mask if he was appearing on video. Maybe it's just for the sake of appearances. Let's read on. Judge Denise Redding granted the prosecution's request for $1.25 million unconditional bail, or a lower bail of $1 million. Oh, thanks. Thanks for knocking $250,000 off, guys. $1 million with conditions. So basically, you're not going anywhere. $1 million bail conditions would require Chauvin to turn in his firearms and gun permits, have no contact with the Floyd family, and not work in security capacity or as an officer while out on bail. Yeah, your days doing that are done, dude. Chauvin's attorney, Eric Nelson, did not object to the requirements and asked for a hearing to be set for June 29th. The officer did not enter a plea. It's very interesting. The idea, I think, here is that he's going to try to go for not guilty, but in our justice system, if you defend yourself in any way, you can receive harsher penalties. And so we've created a system where if you will admit guilt in some way, then you'll get a lesser sentence. So I'm sure that the lawyers are trying to work out how we can, not give him the maximum amount of sentencing possible, possibly by entering some kind of no contest plea. If he goes for not guilty, they're going to throw the book at this guy. So I understand the motivation behind that. Video of the incident showed Chauvin putting his knee on Floyd's neck. We all were basically witnesses to that, so I'm not going to rehash all the individual details of that horrible video, but Floyd's death has inspired global protest against racial disparities. I wish the main focus of those protests was actually the disparity in the power that the police have over the citizens without any responsibility being taken upon themselves. But so they've apparently also opened a civil rights investigation into the Minneapolis police. I had heard that they were dissolving the police in favor of something else. I'm not sure what they're going to do, but that's actually really exciting. I mean, I'm not naive enough to hope that they'll just like come up with something that's way better and actually fair. But the idea that we're even considering trying something different, that makes Minneapolis like a test case for what are some of the possibilities that we can do besides police. I mean, it's not to say that people don't want to have security forces or that only people who can afford bodyguards should be allowed to be safe. It's that, I think that we're creative enough human beings that we can come up with solutions that don't involve this monopoly on violence that the police have over their population right now. There's a economist named Bob Murphy. He did a talk for the Mises Institute where he actually outlined some ideas for law without government. Because I think the idea here is that there are only two arguments. One argument is that we should abolish the police and just have nothing. And then the other argument is that things remain exactly as they are. Well, that's not actually acceptable in either regard. It's not acceptable to just have like Mad Max level chaos, and it's also not acceptable to just like leave things the way that they are. And I think most people would agree on that. So I like the idea that they are actually exploring options. It's like, hey, this system's not perfect. Okay, that's fine. if it's not perfect, let's try some other imperfect options and see if something is a little less imperfect. So that's kind of my hot take on that. And we're going to move right on to the next story. Also from NBC, from Alicia Fieldstad. Ooh, I like that name, Fieldstad. Denver police fire pepper balls at a man yelling at his pregnant fiance in the car. I don't know if you guys saw this story or not, but the video is kind of awful. Like, this guy, I'll show you the video. He pulls up to the stoplight. He's not even a protester. These guys are actually working for a food delivery service. And he pulls up to the light. And hopefully the audio is okay for you guys. I don't know. I hope that you can see and hear this. So he pulls up and they fire up. He's screaming at them, "My girlfriend is pregnant," in the car. Yeah. So he's understandably pissed. He's yelling at him, and then they start firing pepper balls at him. Yeah, you hear the protesters screaming as this is happening. Yeah, he gets hit, the windows of his car get hit, and his girlfriend inside of the car gets hit. So eventually he just like pulls on through the light. Yeah, that's awful. That's awful on everybody's part there. So Denver police are investigating an incident from last week caught on video. And oh, shoot, something's happening to my computer. I'm sorry, guys. I'm really new at this and I'm not a technical person, so just like bear with me a little bit here. Shoot. Okay. Denver police is investigating an incident from last week that was caught on video. It has gone viral. Officers are shown spraying pepper balls at a man who is screaming that he has a pregnant woman in the car. Video of the incident, which happened earlier Sunday morning, was shared on Twitter and YouTube, shows the man getting out of his car to stop and yell at officers. "You shot up a car with a pregnant woman in it with effing tear gas. It's unclear what happened before the driver stopped his car." So the claim that I saw was that he and this woman are just working for a food service, and they pull up to a stoplight that happens to be sort of in the middle of this protest that's going on, and cops don't give a shit. So they started firing pepper balls, and he understandably got out, pissed off. His pregnant girlfriend is in the car. They light him up again because, you know, they're cops. So that's not an excuse for them. That's just understanding the animal that I'm dealing with, which, you know, if you have like a rabid dog, and you're like, "Oh, I'm going to go pet it." It's like, no, it's a rabid dog. I'm not making an excuse. I just don't want you to get bit. I hope that makes sense. So where were we? Video of the incident, which happened early Saturday morning, shared on Twitter and YouTube, shows a man getting out of his car. Oh, I already read that part. But then the driver in the video continues to inform officers that there is a pregnant woman in the passenger seat. Then they spray a barrage of projectiles at the man in the car. The man outside of the car on the driver's side and at the man outside of the car and the passenger side, where a woman is sitting closest to the officers. The man eventually gets into his car and then just drives away. So, well, here, let's continue to read. Shitario Brown says, "Honestly, I thought I was going to die. I thought I was going to be the next black man shot by police." He said the incident happened early Saturday morning during protests in Denver over the death of George Floyd, but Brown and his pregnant fiance weren't protesting, they were making food deliveries. Brown began yelling at police when his car was hit by a pepper ball round. "We're not protesters, we're not part of the riots," Brown said. "We were delivering food, we were working. For them to just go out of their way to shoot innocent people is unfair. And I proceeded to tell them that there was a pregnant woman in the car. That's when they unloaded 50 to 75 plus round." I don't know if it was 50 to 75, dude, but yeah, they lit him up. I mean, we all just watched that. So, "into my car with my pregnant girlfriend in there." Brittany King, Brown's fiance, who I assume is this woman, is 18 weeks pregnant and was hit in the abdomen at least 3 times. My goodness. According to the couple's attorney, Scott Mellon, when she got to the hospital, her fetus had a high heart rate. She was still suffering from cramps and difficulty breathing and difficulty eating. Yeah, that would scare the shit out of me, and I probably wouldn't eat for a week. When I get nervous, I don't eat. So, that poor woman. Oh my God, that's horrible. She also suffered a broken bone in her hand when she tried to block her face. Oh my God. That's horrible. I was just thinking this literally in my head. I was thinking these pepper balls are no joke. Really, they're really not. Brown had a laceration on his face and bruises on his body. He got out of the car to yell at officers. Okay, so here's the thing. This is what I was talking about. The beast that you're dealing with. You got out of your car to yell at them because you had an emotional outburst, which is a completely normal and human thing to do when the woman that you love, who is pregnant with your child, is getting attacked. So I don't think that this guy's reaction was necessarily like out of bounds. However, it is dumb because this is a rabid beast. The cops are kind of a rabid beast. So if you poke the rabid beast, it's going to attack you. I almost kind of think like he got off light here. Him jumping out of the car aggressively like that, they might have killed him. And I'm not saying on his part he did the wrong thing in terms of what a normal human reaction is, but I think the point that we're all realizing as a culture and a group here is that the cops are not behaving the way that normal people would behave. So if you have normal reactions to things, they're still going to haul off and, do what cops do to you. So just, there's a way that it ought to be that's in your head, and you think this is the way that it ought to be. And you might interact with the world based on the way that you think it ought to be, but then there's the way that it is. And I'm not saying like cower to the police and do whatever they say. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying be smart enough that if you have your pregnant fiance in the car next to you, you do your best to get out of that situation as fast as possible with as little confrontation as possible. Turn the car, I would have just gone through or turned the car around or whatever. The screaming at them, that's inviting more. It's not his fault. He interacted normally. That's the way a normal man would interact when someone shoots at his pregnant girlfriend. But I'm saying have more caution because these cops, they're out of their minds. And they're not going to say, oh, it's a pregnant woman, I should rethink my actions. That's not the mentality here. The mentality is like, hey, let's light him up and, let him know who's actually in charge here. We're in a police state, kids. This is not, I really don't know what to say. Things like this getting filmed and then, people being able to view them is a good thing because you can see that the cops are not behaving normally. But as far as that man and protecting the life of the child, I would have just gotten the hell out of there as fast as possible. Maybe that's just, I'm a coward too. So with that being said, let's move on to the next story. This one, I really had to laugh about this one. Nancy Pelosi and Democrats kneeled for 8 minutes to honor George Floyd. I'm not laughing at the idea that they would honor George Floyd. I'm laughing at the idea that kneeling, which is the very thing that killed George Floyd, is being used as a symbol for solidarity with the protests against police for his death. First of all, kneeling is a submission sign. George Floyd was killed by a man kneeling on his neck, and that was directly an act of aggression with a knee pointed down into the ground. It's kind of not the same thing as taking a knee, which is, kneeling down. Well, let's read the story first, and then I'll give you my hot take. Sorry, this is my first run at this, and I have a lot of opinions, so I might interject here and there. Global news. U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Democrat members of Congress kneeled in silence for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, which is the amount of time that the officer was kneeling on George Floyd, on the marble floor of Emancipation Hall in the U.S. Capitol on Monday, the duration that the Minneapolis officer Derek Chauvin kneeled on the neck of George Floyd before he died. The coroner's report actually said that he was dead within 6 minutes and that the officer continued to kneel on his neck for an additional 3 minutes after the man had become unresponsive. He was unresponsive, and then Chauvin continued to kneel on him for 3 additional minutes. So that's something to know. So these people came in and kneeled down. The part of the story that is interesting is not so much the kneeling down, which I have opinions about, but it's the 110-year-old dinosaurs that make up Congress trying to get back up from kneeling, which I'm going to show you guys here. Oh, wait, hold on. She's already up. Don't look. Okay. She can't get up because she's 9,000 years old. And the rest of them didn't look like they had a great, easy time of it either. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm kind of a fat girl and I struggle to get up off the floor too. But I can't stop laughing watching Nancy try to get up off this floor. Like, that's what you get for kneeling. Because kneeling is a submission sign. When you take a knee, when you kneel down, you're submitting. And this is submission to the mob. So much of what's going on right now is like complicated by politics, and everybody's trying to get their own little weird narrative in. And so there are people who genuinely think that the kneeling is done in the way that Colin Kaepernick had intended it. Kaepernick, doesn't matter. Kaepernick intended, which is I'm going to kneel in a peaceful protest. And I see all these memes going around saying, oh, well, you didn't like it when Colin Kaepernick kneeled. So now we're doing the rioting. Now we're doing the protesting. But I don't view it in this way, okay? Because it's not, these people could have kneeled when Colin Kaepernick was kneeling. If the intent behind them was to, you know, protest this thing, they could have supported him when he was doing that, and they didn't do that. This is being done because there are mobs burning down cities. And these dinosaurs who are in control of everything want everything to go back to normal. Everything going back to normal is them being in control of everything. They're not in control of everything right now. In a lot of ways, mobs and people who are burning things down are in control of some things. So they're trying to, you know, invite the status quo where they are in control of everything back. So let's watch it one more time because it's really funny. Are you going to loop it? No, they're not going to loop it. One more time. One more time. Oh, God. Oh, God. If you're 9,000 years old, you can't take a knee on a marble floor and then get back up. You just don't have the mobility for that anymore. Nancy, girl. And she wore the most ridiculous heels to do this too. I know, I'm spending way more time on this than is necessary. She's in these tiny little kitten heels. And she's trying to get up. Okay, all right, let's move on. I'm sorry. In the next story, somewhat related to this story, we have Joe Biden campaign opposes calls to defund the police. So I know that J. Edgar kind of like read you guys some stories about this yesterday already, where Joe Biden is, you know, what can we say about Joe Biden? Let's read the article first, and then I'll give you my take. I keep forgetting to do that. I think you want the take first. Let me read the article. Democratic presidential contender Joe Biden's campaign said Monday that the former vice president does not support calls to defund the police, amid growing calls to do so by activists across the country. Who wrote this article? Oh my God, Julia Manchester. Okay. You're wordy, Julia. As his criminal justice proposal made clear months ago, Vice President Biden does not believe that police should be defunded, Biden campaign spokesperson Andrew Bates told reporters. He hears and shares the deep grief and frustration that those calling out for change. God, Joe Biden doesn't hear. Okay, I'm going to stop. He hears and shares the deep grief and frustration of those calling out for change and is driven to ensure that justice is done. And we put a stop to this terrible pain, Bates added. I love how people are always speaking for Joe Biden because he can't speak for himself. Biden supports the urgent need for reform, including funding for public schools, summer programs, mental health, and substance abuse treatment centers from funding for police. Okay, so I guess he's saying take funding from police to give to those things so that officers can focus on the job of policing. I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think that we have cops doing a lot more than should be required of that job. They're dealing with a lot of mental health cases, which, you know, they don't have the professional training to deal with. Like, these are things that, like, you need counselors and therapists and all, you know, people who know how to, like, de-escalate situations with people who are having mental breakdowns. And that's not the cops. The cops are a hammer and the problems are nails. And so it doesn't matter if you're a crackhead or if you're a person having a mental breakdown or whatever, you're all the same. So you're going to get hammered. I saw a really awesome tweet, and I wish I remember who said it, but they said, I wish there was a number like 911, like an emergency number that you could call, and that the people who showed up didn't have guns. It wasn't necessarily like, we're coming here to kill you. Now, instantaneously, people on Twitter found problems with that, saying, oh, you could just have these people show up and you could rob them, which I suppose is true. But it's like, if your 18, 17-year-old autistic son is having a mental breakdown, you're his mother. You know, I'm all of 4 feet 11 inches tall. So if I had an 18-year-old autistic son who was freaking out, he might be a lot stronger than me. I might be reluctant to call the police because I don't want them to put a bullet to him. So, you know, there might be an emergency kind of number that you could call where people who don't have the intent to kill your family can show up and help you with them. I don't know. I'm not an expert, but that's just maybe a suggestion that I thought was interesting and worth exploring. And we're entering an age of exploring new ideas concerning security and policing. So, you know, let's put that one on the table. Calls to defund police have grown amid nationwide protests over the death last month of George Floyd. I hate the way this is written. Who died after a Minneapolis police officer knelt on his neck for nearly 9 minutes. A majority of the Minneapolis City Council voted to disband the local police department and replace the office with what members have said will be a new model of public safety. Whew. If that doesn't put a chill to you, I don't know what will. The problem... Okay, so before I was saying I really support the idea of trying out new things, which I do. However, when central planners try to come up with things like a new model of public safety, I get flashes of the National Assembly and Robespierre. There is just something... Ooh. Luckily, it's not, this is not something that's being implemented across the entire country. It's going to be implemented in Minneapolis, and that's going to be sort of a petri dish, a little test case to see if this new idea would work. Unfortunately, if this doesn't pan out, most people will turn around and say, okay, it's status quo or nothing. But maybe there will be some other cities and other places that will try other methods too, not just the new model of public safety that Minneapolis is coming up with, which God knows what that consists of. I'm sure we'll find out later, but right now we don't know. And that's the thing, people will stay with what they know. They know the status quo, they know the police, and yeah, it's not perfect, but we're going to stick with what we know. This new model of public safety, we don't know what that means. And by the way that the government in that area has reacted to some of the looting, people are afraid that it's not going to be the kind of thing that will protect their homes and businesses. Not that the police and the status quo have done that either. So, a lot of uncertainty going around. The Biden campaign said that Biden does support the funding of community policing programs that work to improve relations between police and communities, and as well as diversifying police departments. Police departments are already quite diverse, and do tend, this is something that's been looked into, and they do tend to reflect the makeup of the community in that area. Not always. Sometimes you're going to have a white cop interact with a black person, or a black cop interact with a white person, but for the most part, there is a, diverse group of people who work in policing, and we only hear about certain cases. So that is something to note that I've looked into a little bit myself, and you should as well. Don't take my word for it. The Biden campaign said that he does support this funding. He also backs the use of police body cameras. I think everyone does, except cops. The campaign took a swipe at Trump, of course, Trump's response to the issue, saying the administration has made reform difficult. There are many police departments, quoting, "There are many police departments across the country who are seeking to realize these kinds of changes, but haven't had the resources to. And the Trump administration has, in fact, made obtaining those resources more difficult. This is at the core of Joe Biden's plan to bring transformative change to our criminal justice system." The Trump campaign rapid response director, is that a real thing? Trump campaign rapid response director Andrew Clark, what a title you have, Andrew Clark, hit back at the statement on Twitter, saying that Biden was too afraid of the far left to unequivocally say it himself on camera. Trump and Republicans have worked to promote a message of law and order amid the protests. Trump's campaign tied Biden to calls to defund the police on Monday. Yeah, I did see that. And so Biden did come out and clarify that he doesn't, in fact, want to defund police. And of course, you shouldn't believe that Joe Biden wants to defund police. Joe Biden was one of the signatories and I think primary writers on the 1994 crime bill, which is responsible for a lot of the increase in policing and incarceration. Joe Biden will, of course, claim it's my cat, sorry. Joe Biden will claim and has claimed that the crime bill in no way affected the increase in incarceration because it was a federal crime bill. Like, so that only like federal, it only applied to federal crimes. However, it did set the tone. It set the tone for the states to say, hey, we want to crack down harder on crime. We're going to crack down harder on drug crime, especially. And so, like, all of this increase in the drug war, even it's, Joe Biden didn't go to each individual state and say, okay, we're going to militarize, we're going to increase the drug war, and we are going to pack our prisons full of people, and we want you, the states, to do that too. But that's what the practical effect of the crime bill ended up being. And there are some quotes and some videos flying around that have Joe Biden basically bragging about how many more prison cells he created and how many more people were going to go into those prisons. So it's, it would be very interesting to me for Joe Biden to turn around now and say that he supports defunding the police when he basically is like the creator or one of the creators of the police state that we have now. And the 1994 crime bill is not the only thing, like, because it's like, okay, yeah, he did that one thing and it's a mistake, but it's not. There was a bill in 1986 of similar types of things. There's a bill in 1988, and these are all like, the worry at that time for most people in politics was appearing soft on crime. There was an increase in violent crime. It had been increasing since the 60s. And as they were going into the 90s, they said, okay, we're going to crack down on these drugs. We're going to crack down on the crack epidemic. I'm good at this, right, guys? And so it's like a series of like 4 to 6 bills that he signed that co-authored and signed. So Joe Biden is like the architect of the current drug war police state that we have going on now that's increasing the incarceration of all of our citizens and having these violent interactions between cops and people in the inner cities, many of whom are Black. So, this is a nuanced situation. It's not defund the police or keep everything as it is. It's that the only option we have besides Trump, who is like law and order, crack their heads open, which, I mean, when it comes to looting, I do think, like, you can't have it two ways. You can't have people just, like, burning everything down. I do understand the point that looting is the language of the oppressed, but violence is not a language. There are other ways to express yourself besides, like, burning down a target. Also, when you burn down a target, you're affecting the poorest people in your community. Like the old people who need to get their prescriptions and stuff, who don't, now buses aren't running, so they can't bus themselves out to a Walgreens in the suburbs to go get their medicine. So, like, all of the things that are happening, it's like misdirected anger that everyone is using to destroy themselves. Trump's not making himself look any better by having this like crackdown, law and order, bust their heads open, bust their heads when you put them in a police car. That just gives, Democrats things to run around and say, not that they need it, but, run around and say, oh, look at Trump. He wants to bring the hammer down on these protesters and all they want is reform. Well, okay, yes, protesters do want reform. But you also have to like stop the looting. So, it's complicated. There's a complicated set of circumstances here, and nothing can proceed and until basically the fires are put out. So I understand the idea behind let's put the fires out and then talk about like the test cases such as Minneapolis, starting some new things. We can try some new things. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, let's get off this topic because it's, emotional. So this was interesting. And I know that this isn't politics, and I know that maybe the show is sort of oriented around politics, but I thought that this was really interesting. SpaceX of Elon Musk scraps its plan to build the Mars spaceship at the port of LA again. So they're really, I don't think that Elon is going to be in California for too much longer. But let's read. 2 years ago, SpaceX created excitement when it proposed building its Mars spaceship and rocket booster at a vacant site in the port of Los Angeles. The company got political backing for the plan. Local officials touted it as a win for Southern California manufacturing, and the project got the green light. Then SpaceX changed its mind and withdrew from the agreement. This year, SpaceX came back and pitched the idea again, seeking permission to use the same site for the same project. It would create 130 local aerospace jobs and start work quickly, the company said. But just a month after getting the green light from the city and port officials, SpaceX decided against it again. In a letter dated March 27th, a SpaceX official gave the Port of LA notice of Elon Musk. Oh, God, I hate the way these people write. The Port of LA notice of the Elon Musk-led company's intent to terminate the permit agreement. The date of termination was May 11th, according to the letter, which was provided by the Times. In the letter, SpaceX did not explain why it was ending the agreement. The company did not respond to requests for comment. But Elon and the government of California have been getting along really well, so I think he's pulling up stakes. But let's read. The letter came about a month after SpaceX got approval from the LA City Council and the LA Board of Harbor Commissioners. God, we have too many officials. To use the site on Terminal Island to build aerospace parts. The initial permit cleared the company to use 12.4 acres to make aerospace parts, with an option to expand its presence to 19 acres. The company representatives had told Councilman Joe Biscayno's office that SpaceX wanted to use the site for additional manufacturing capacity for its Starship Mars spaceship. Biscayno did extraordinary things to accommodate their sense of urgency, says Branimir? Dude, this guy is from Lord of the Rings. Branimir Kavadik. I can't say this dude's name, but we're going to call him Branimir. And he is from Middle Earth. Branimir, communications director and senior advisor for the councilman's office of Middle Earth. This is our second go around. It's frustrating. So yeah, I mean, I understand that completely. In 2018, SpaceX said that it would build its Mars rocket and spaceships at the Port of LA and got all necessary approvals, and the company changed its mind, terminated the agreement, and said it would build the Starship prototypes in Texas. The company is committed to continuing its other operations in California, including Hawthorne headquarters, the launch site at Vandenberg Air Force Base near Lompoc, and a different site at a port it uses for the recovery of its first stage rocket boosters, the Dragon spacecraft, which is awesome, according to the March letter. But Musk hasn't always felt that way about the operation. Okay, so Elon's gonna pull out of California. I wouldn't take this committed to continuing thing too seriously. Only in things that it's maybe too expensive for them to move. But it's SpaceX. They've got the money. So Elon has been having so many problems with the government of California that I really do think that he is eventually going to pull up stakes and move out of there, because their regulation systems are just going to make it impossible for him to work. But also, this is a business tactic to say, oh, you guys aren't doing exactly what we want you to do, so we're going to give this thing to Texas instead. And they're going to bend over backwards to try to keep, hopefully I would, to try to keep SpaceX in California. So Elon shows up again, says, hey, maybe we try this again. They're going to bend over backwards to try to get him in there, not do everything his way, and he's going to threaten to pull out. So, Biscayno and Branimir, Biscayno, he should call the bluff and be like, fine, move that shit to Texas. But, that's going to happen anyway. Elon's pulling out of California. That's my prediction. So, the next article comes to us from the Wall Street Journal. They are saying, or Kate Davidson of the Wall Street Journal is saying, that the recession in the U.S. actually began back in February. So a lot of people have been saying, oh, we're going to have a recession because of the COVID. But the truth is that the economy has been in trouble for a while now. Let's read. Oh, no. Oh, they let me read the story yesterday, but I didn't. I'm not a paying customer on the Wall Street Journal, so they're not gonna. Okay, so the gist of this story. Shoot, I'm not gonna pay the dollar right this second to get this article to you guys, but if you have the Wall Street Journal, you can get this article. Basically, we've already been in a downturn. For the longest time, economists have been saying that the yield curve is flattening. The yield curve flattened basically right before the 2008 crash last time. I don't know enough about economics to tell you exactly what a yield curve is and what it means in reference to this, but it is a canary in the coal mine. And the yield curve has been flattening and I think even inverted for some time now, which, you know, anybody who's paying attention to economic trends really kind of knew that this was going to come. We never really dealt with the bad financial decisions that we were making in after the 2008 crash. We just kind of like papered over them with money that was printed and continued business as usual. So things kind of blew up into a bigger bubble. And so now not only do we have the housing, we've got the student loans, we've got, you know, just basically a completely over leveraged debt-based economy that has no way of sustaining itself. And in light of all of the COVID things, we've been printing money like crazy. I'm a little worried about the trees with as much money as we've been printing. Like, it's giving me environmental concerns that we are burning down the world's forests in an effort to print these trillions of dollars. Now, I don't know that they're necessarily like printing all of those trillions of dollars, but they are creating a lot of new money that is being flooded into the market, which is going to cause massive inflation. So a lot of economists have been saying the next 18 to 24 months, buckle in, guys. Things are gonna get rough, and it's supposed to make 2008 look like a cakewalk. So I am sorry about the paywall here. I guess you get a freebie. I was able to read this yesterday, but I can't access it today. I'll take care of that before tomorrow. The next one is that Harry Potter is throwing J.K. Rowling under the bus, which is kind of biting the hand that feeds you. Let's read. Daniel Radcliffe responds to J.K. Rowling's anti-trans tweets. Transgender women are women. I don't know if you guys saw this, and I did pull up the tweet, so let's read J.K.'s tweet before we read Daniel Radcliffe's response to it. And yeah, my Twitter is pink, so get over it. J.K. Rowling says, if sex isn't real, there's no same-sex attraction. If sex isn't real, the lived reality of women globally is erased. I know and love trans people, but erasing the concept of sex removes the ability of many to meaningfully discuss their lives. It isn't hate to speak the truth. And she continues, the idea that women like me, who have been empathetic to trans people for decades, feeling kinship because they're vulnerable in the same way as women, i.e. to male violence, hate trans people because they think sex is real, has lived consequences, is a nonsense. I respect every trans person's right to live in any way that feels authentic and comfortable to them. I'd march with you if you were discriminated against on the basis of being trans. At the same time, my life has been shaped by being female. I do not believe it is hateful to say so. Gosh, that is such a reasonable comment. Like, I find that to be a reasonable commentary, part of a discussion. She's beginning a discussion here, in my opinion. And when she put this tweet out on the 6th, people flipped out, called it bigotry. They're calling her a TERF, which is a trans exclusionary radical feminist, which I have problems with that term for many reasons. But interestingly enough, Blair White, a trans woman, says facts. I only see facts here. So, you know, it's not as though every trans person on the planet is offended by the idea that sex is real. In fact, a lot of trans people will tell you that they do believe that sex is real and they just simply want to be the other one. So, you know, to me, this is just like inviting a discussion. But Variety has a different way of phrasing things. And Daniel Radcliffe, who's obviously interested in having a successful career more than he is in honoring the person who made him into an international superstar with her creation, decides to throw her under the bus. So, Daniel Radcliffe responds to J.K. Rowling's anti-trans tweets. I read them to you. They don't seem anti-trans at all. Transgender women are women. Harry Potter star Daniel Radcliffe posted a lengthy response on Monday to a controversial anti-trans tweet posted by J.K. Rowling. It's not anti-trans. That wasn't an anti-trans. That's opening the discussion. I'm going to read on. I'm sorry. Opinions! Transgender women are women, Radcliffe wrote in an essay posted on the website of the Trevor Project, a nonprofit dedicated to crisis intervention and suicide prevention for LGBTQ people. Any statement to the contrary erases the identity and dignity of transgender people and goes against all advice given by professional healthcare associations, who have far more expertise on this subject than either Joe or I. The 30-year-old actor, he's 30? God bless him. Look at his beard. Bless his little cotton socks. The 30-year-old actor cited that 78% of transgender and non-binary youth have reported that they've been discriminated against due to their gender identity. It's clear that we need to do more to support transgender and non-binary people, not invalidate their identities, and not cause farther harm, Radcliffe wrote. On Saturday, Rowling posted a series of tweets which she argued that discussion of gender identity invalidates biological sex. I don't think that's what she said. She wasn't saying we can't even have the discussion. Listen to the way that this sentence pissed me off. Saturday, Rowling posted a series of tweets in which she argued that discussion of gender identity invalidates biological sex. That's not what she said. We read the tweets. We read the tweets right here. What she said is that we need to talk about the fact that this actually has an effect on the lived experiences of women globally. Okay? So there's a discussion of attitudes towards transgender people, but there also is a discussion about the lives of women across the globe. Women in Africa, women in Middle Eastern countries. Okay? So, first of all, screw you, Daniel, okay? JK's creation is what made you into an international superstar. You could show her the barest amount of support in not creating a narrative or helping to create a narrative that she's just an anti-transgender person. She states explicitly that she loves transgender people, that she would march with them. I mean, I've encountered people who hate transgender people. They're not gonna march with them. They don't think that they should even exist, okay? That's an anti-transgender person. J.K. Rowling in no way expressed anti-trans views. She simply expressed the idea that gender is real, that there is such a thing as men and women, and that women who are biological women born into the world that we live in have different lived experiences than men, even men who later transition and become women, okay? So the whole transgender are women, trans women are women is a political, catchphrase. It's something that's repeated. It's an easy to quote thing. Trans women are women. Okay, fine, but there's a more subtle conversation to be had here. There's a more nuanced conversation to be had here. JK is trying to have the conversation, and she's being shut down by everyone in Hollywood and people like Adam B. Very. I don't even think that's a real... Your parents did not name you Adam B. Very. So Adam B. Very here writes this article, and he phrases, even out of the gate, that she argues that discussion of gender identity invalidates biological sex. That's not what she said. She's trying to have that discussion. Maybe there's something to the idea that 75,000 different genders, including gerbil gender and deer gender and aerospace gender, do at some level invalidate that women have, a different lived experience. And, I'm speaking the language of the left here. Women globally have, issues about being women, in the way that they're treated in a lot of different countries. And we're not just talking about the privilege of Western liberated cultures where women have all of the same legal rights as men. We're talking about places like where women are truly second-class citizens. So something we kind of flippantly say in this country all the time. But the truth is that there are no legal rights that cisgender women have that trans women don't have. So merely discussing the opinion that trans women are a different thing than biological cis women, that's a discussion. JK is trying to have a discussion. And, I'm kind of upset with Daniel Radcliffe for not even being giving her the barest support on this and saying, hey, I know this woman and I know that she's not trying to, invalidate, that's what he said, yeah. Any statement, meaning there shall be no discussion, to the contrary, erases the identity and dignity of transgender people. No, it does not. It's this, she's trying to have the discussion, and you're telling her that any statement, any discussion erases the identity of transgender people. No, it doesn't. It absolutely does not. There are many transgender people who will tell you biological sex is real, and I simply feel I am the other. I am the other one. I'm not male, I'm female. I'm not female, I'm male. There are a lot of problems with self-identification and things like that that are a discussion, that isn't settled science, that a lot of it is still theory. So I think that we need to not assume the worst in people when they're trying to have these discussions. We can't even discuss it. I mean, that's lame. I still support JK. I still love her work and her creation. We're gonna move on before I get too ranty about it. Let's see. Asymptomatic. Oh God, this was a doozy. So I actually brought up the CNBC one, the CNN one, and the Fox one, because the World Health Organization has now come out and made a statement that says that spread of the virus between asymptomatic people is very rare, meaning that this entire... Let me read the article first. I'm going to read the article first, and then I'm going to give you my opinion on it. Okay, so this is from CNBC. William Furrer and Noah Higgins Dunn, two writers on this one. Coronavirus patients without symptoms aren't driving the spread of the virus. Let me read that one more time. Coronavirus patients without symptoms aren't driving the spread of the virus. Coronavirus patients without symptoms aren't driving the spread of the virus, World Health Organization officials said Monday, casting doubt on concerns by some researchers that the disease could be difficult to contain due to asymptomatic infections. Meaning that if you go out and you exist... Okay, I'm gonna wait. Oh my God. Some people, particularly young and otherwise healthy individuals who are infected by the coronavirus, never develop symptoms or only develop mild symptoms. Others might not develop symptoms until days after they were already infected. Preliminary evidence from the earliest outbreaks indicated that the virus could spread from person-to-person contact. Actually, we were told by the World Health Organization that it didn't spread that way, but I guess they memory hold that story. Even if the carrier didn't have symptoms. But World Health Organization officials now say that while asymptomatic spread can occur, this is not the main way that it's being transmitted. So we're back to one. We're back to square one. First, it doesn't spread person to person. This is the statement that came out of China and was backed up by the World Health Organization. Then it was, you spread that virus everywhere, even if you're not sick and you don't have symptoms, and there's no testing, so you don't know whether you have symptoms or not, so you better stay in your house or you want old people to die. And that was literally, like, my own mother is not speaking to me right now because I didn't buy that narrative that, all the young, healthy people needed to stay in their houses to prevent the spread, to all of the elderly people, because that's not how it works. But anyway, because you don't quarantine healthy people. That's what I mean by that's not how it works. You quarantine the sick, you quarantine the vulnerable. You don't quarantine the entire population of healthy people and shut the economy down in the process. So they first said, oh, it's fine. It's not spreading person to person. So we continued to allow people to come from countries that had the infection. They brought the infection over here. Then they said, oh my God, you're going to kill everyone, even if you're not sick. You better stay in your house. And now they're saying, oh, it turns out, it doesn't really spread person to person if you're asymptomatic. Which, if you're asymptomatic, you're not sneezing, therefore particles are not getting into the air. That's just physics. If you're not putting particles in the air, you're not spreading it. Anyway, let's read on. Preliminary evidence from the earliest outbreaks indicate that the virus could spread person to person, even if the carrier didn't have symptoms. But WHO officials now say that while asymptomatic spread can occur, it is not the main way the disease is being transmitted. From the data we have, it still seems to be rare that an asymptomatic person actually transmits onward to a secondary individual, Dr. Maria Van Kerkhove, head of the WHO's Emerging Diseases and Zoonosis Unit, oh, I guess because the disease came from animal to human transmission, which is a fact. So please don't say I'm racist for saying so. But a lot of these viruses actually do come from animal to human transmission. So she's part of the Emerging Diseases and Zoonosis Unit. Said at a news briefing from the United Nations agency, Geneva headquartered. Sorry, I lost my place. Anyway, she said that it's very rare. It's very rare. Government responses should focus on detecting and isolating infected people with symptoms and tracking anyone who might have come into contact with them, Van Kerkhove said. She acknowledged that some studies have indicated asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic spread in nursing homes and household settings, which makes sense because elderly people, mainly those over 70 and immune-compromised people, are at most risk for getting the disease, which is why you would quarantine them. More research and data is needed to truly answer, and they put truly answer, the questions of whether the coronavirus can spread widely through asymptomatic carriers. So we're leaving it open to change our minds again. Any good scientist should, right? But that should tell you something about when they say the science is settled. Anyone who tells you the science is settled is not a scientist, because just in this instance alone, the World Organization has flip-flopped back and forth and left themselves an out to flip-flop again. So when you come up at someone and say, you better do this because the World Health Organization is an authority, you need to listen to authority, listen to the experts know. No, they don't. They don't know. They're just saying things. They're trying to mold and control your behavior to what they think they need to do at that time. It doesn't always necessarily represent the truth. We have a number of reports from countries who are doing very detailed contact tracing, she said. They're following asymptomatic cases, they're following contacts, and they're not finding secondary transmission onward. It's very rare. If asymptomatic spread proves not to be the main driver of the coronavirus transmission, the policy implications could be tremendous. A report from the CDC and the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention published on April 1st, citing potential pre-symptomatic transmission, which I assume is like through viral shedding, as a reason for the importance of social distancing. This is back in April 1st. So they were telling you that even if you weren't coughing, even if you weren't sneezing, you were going through a process called virus shedding, which means that like you are still able to pass the virus to another person, even though, you're not actually like showing any outward symptoms of it. So to be sure, asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic spread of the virus appears to still be happening, Van Kerkhove said, but remains rare. The finding has important implications for how to screen for the virus. We really want to be focused on following the symptomatic cases, Van Kerkhove said. If we actually followed all of the symptomatic cases, isolated those cases, followed the contacts, and quarantined those contacts, we would drastically reduce the outbreak. So what this woman has just said is that you quarantine sick people who are in danger, people who have a compromised immune systems, and people who have symptoms. You don't quarantine an entire healthy population of people and crash the global economy. But, I was an a-hole for saying that a month ago, apparently. Fauci. Ooh, Fauci. I don't like Fauci. Trust the experts. Trust the experts. So basically, the reason I brought up the CNN and the Fox News article is just to kind of point out the sort of different ways that they're phrasing it. I think you guys should both read through both of these articles because it's really interesting, because the CNN article basically went and found other people to kind of pad their narrative. Where this Juthani, who was Juthani? Yeah, is a doctor, Manisha Juthani, an infectious diseases specialist at the Yale School of Medicine. So, CNN goes and digs out someone who kind of can pad their narrative and say, well, it wasn't that they were asymptomatic, rather that they were spreading diseases before becoming symptomatic. So Juthani here is saying that, the World Health Organization is not correct. So which expert are we supposed to listen to here? Juthani is Dr. Juthani is a disease spread expert who is right here disagreeing with what the World Health Organization has said. And then Fox, of course, is like, you know, basically we shut down this entire economy, and now this woman is saying that, you know, we didn't need to do that. So I encourage you to both read the CNN article reporting this story and the Fox News article reporting this story, just to kind of get like the flavor of the different way that these news stories, it's a tale of two cities here. And I think that would be interesting to read. But we're running short on time, so I'm going to roll through since I already read that. This is kind of COVID related. This comes from The Guardian, you know. But this has been reported by several different news institutions. And they're talking about how many masks they're finding in the ocean. More masks than jellyfish. Coronavirus waste ending up in the ocean. So you remember when everyone was telling you you were a bastard for drinking out of a plastic straw because you were killing the turtles? Well, there are now more masks than jellyfish in the ocean. Conservationists have warned that the coronavirus pandemic could... Oh, let's read the name of the person who wrote the article. Oh, it doesn't say. Okay. All right. They didn't want to credit their writer, I guess. Conservationists have warned that the coronavirus pandemic could spark a surge in ocean pollution, adding to the glut of plastic waste that already threatens marine life. After finding disposable masks floating like jellyfish and waterlogged latex gloves scattered across seabeds, a French nonprofit, Operation Mer Propre, I don't speak French. This French organization, whose activities include regularly picking up a litter along the Côte d'Azur, began sounding the alarm late last month. Divers found what Geoffrey Peltier of the organization described as COVID waste, dozens of gloves, masks, and bottles of hand sanitizer beneath the waves of the Mediterranean, mixed in with the usual litter of disposable cups and aluminum cans. The quantities of masks and gloves found were far from enormous, said Peltier, but he's worried that the discovery hinted at a new kind of pollution onset to become ubiquitous after millions around the world turned to single-use plastics to combat the coronavirus. It's the promise of pollution to come. In France alone, authorities have ordered 2 billion disposable masks. Laurent Lombard of Operation Mer Propre said, knowing that soon we'll run the risk of having more masks than jellyfish in the Mediterranean, he wrote on social media. Alongside the video of the dive showing algae-entangled masks and soiled gloves in the sea near Antibes. The group hopes that the images, like this one, that's awful. The group hopes that images prompt people around to embrace reusable masks and swap latex gloves for more frequent hand washing. With all of the alternatives and the people wearing the gloves, I don't know if you've seen these people wearing the gloves, but I watch people, they've got the same pair of gloves on. They walk around the whole town doing everything with the same pair of gloves on. So really, these gloves are transmitting the diseases of everything that they touch around everywhere. And, you know, they're protecting themselves, but they're basically, you know, prompting disease spread because, you know, anyway, in the years leading up to the pandemic, environmentalists had warned of the threat posed to oceans and marine life by the skyrocketing plastic pollution. As much as 13 million tons of plastic goes into the oceans every year, according to a 2018 estimate. The Mediterranean Sea's 570,000 tons of plastic flow into it annually. The amount the World WWF is World Wildlife Fund has described as equal to dumping 33,800 plastic bottles every minute into the sea. These figures risk growing substantially as countries around the world confront the coronavirus pandemic. Okay, so, let's just a little bit more into this article because I want to talk about it. With a lifespan of 450 years, these masks are an ecological time bomb, giving their lasting environmental consequences to the planet. 450 years for a mask? I mean, look at this mask. It's already, like, looking pretty rough. I don't know if that boy's going to last 450 years. I think that is not a conservative estimate. But the point is that these things do stay. These pieces of marine debris, they really do stay in the ocean for a long time. Back about a year ago, when in the sweet innocent days of 2019, I remember talking to people about the single-use plastics, and I was actually in support of single-use plastics, despite the fact that we do see horrible images of this poor turtle having a bloody straw removed from his nose, which is awful. People don't realize the single-use plastics actually do prevent disease. They're preventative for disease vectors. One of the reasons that they invented the cake ice cream cone, and this is a little bit of food history for you. The cake ice cream cone and the waffle cone were actually invented because before that they were using these glass dishes to serve ice cream to people, and it was typhoid or maybe tuberculosis had started to go around to the population, and people realized that the glass ice cream cups from the ice cream parlors were actually a disease vector. So people stopped going to ice cream parlors altogether, afraid of getting tuberculosis. So some intrepid people came up with the idea that they would serve their ice cream in these individual, single-use, edible cake cups or waffle cones. And so people now, basically the association between cones and ice cream is ubiquitous because it was a safer way. But before that, people were eating out of these glass dishes, which I guess were not being sanitized properly, and spreading this disease. So that's a case that I actually brought up when I was saying to people that, you don't want to stop the use of these single-use plastics because they actually prevent diseases from going around. Secondly, a lot of people would point out that a lot of this plastic waste is actually coming from countries like Asia, or places like Asia, continent of Africa. These are South America are putting a lot more plastic into the ocean than, say, like the United States or the UK. Yet the United States and the UK are the ones who are banning their plastic bags and they're banning their plastic straws. So I see sort of being the change that you want to see and all that kind of stuff, but really that affects the poorest people. Not only poorest people in the United States, UK, and Australia, but the poorest people globally. People who live in a lot of these places, they don't have access to kitchens, cooking their own food, that kind of thing. And people, especially in a lot of Asian countries, subsist on street food. And so if you're talking about taking the individual use plastics out of that equation, you're talking about spreading diseases. So the individual plastic that people use for their silverware, for drinking straws and stuff like that is actually an indicator of the wealth that's being created in these places that before had largely existed in deep poverty. And now they're becoming wealthier. People are moving into the cities. They're having access to more food, more work, more money. And with that, they have to feed these populations. So these people are, using single-use plastics and disposable things in order to eat. So I think that when you grow an economy and countries become wealthier, they become cleaner. The United States wants to institute all of these plastic bans because they have a higher standard of living, they have a higher standard of wealth, and they can look around and say, I want a cleaner environment. But when your main concerns are that your children might not have enough food to eat, you are kind of not as concerned about whether there's plastic litter in the ocean or not. I'm not saying that poor people don't care about the environment. That's not the implication I'm making. I'm making the very clear statement, the explicit statement that when you're worried about starving to death, you have different priorities. So the more economically that these places can grow, which means allowing them access to these single-use plastics, the wealthier they get, and in the eventuality of time, that desire that you have, that plastic not be filling the ocean, will become a desire of those people too, because they'll be wealthy enough. They'll have enough food in their stomachs and not the same cares of survival. And so they can focus on things like getting the plastics out of the ocean. So I don't think, yes, mankind is putting, I'm aware that mankind is putting a lot of plastic into the ocean right now, but I don't think that's a permanent state of things. The wealthier we become, the better our technology becomes. We're going to get over this. These are training wheels for the future. And then eventually we'll have the technology to go through and be better stewards of the ocean, not dumping as much trash into the ocean. So you can't have it both ways. You either need disposable masks or you have disease factor spreading. You want a clean ocean. you're going to have to deal with the idea that some diseases are going to spread. So, life is full of trade-offs. You have to be willing to trade things off. And personally, if it were me and there was a pandemic around and I was afraid of, getting sick or getting people sick, masks being in the ocean would not be my top priority. So, I encourage everybody to reuse and recycle. My whole thing is homesteading, so I basically don't throw anything away that I think I can use again. I do think the reusable masks, a lot of them are really creative and have filters and all those kinds of things. They're not 100% effective, but they're way more effective than nothing, and probably at some level even more effective than these like flimsy disposable masks are. So, try to be a good steward of your environment. Try not to use too many reusable plastics, but understand that your circumstances are not the circumstances globally, and that some people need access to plastic straws the same way that you had access to plastic straws as your curve of wealth in your country was rising. So, moving on. Trump plans to sign bill pressuring China over Uyghur Muslim crackdown. You guys have been hearing about the Muslim Uyghur population in China. China is not having it. They have moved these people into what are effectively concentration camps. There are stories of abuses. It's really pretty awful. This is a humanitarian concern for sure. But when the U.S. starts poking its head around in foreign countries and saying, oh, you've got some human rights abuses over here we're going to take a look at, it's never a good sign. But let's read the article first. From Reuters. Who wrote this? Oh, it doesn't say. Maybe it'll say the name in the bottom. Okay, so from Reuters, U.S. President Donald Trump plans to sign legislation calling for sanctions on Chinese officials responsible for oppressing Uyghur Muslims. A source familiar with the matter said on Monday, offering a time frame for the signing. The bill, which passed the U.S. House Representatives U.S. House of Representatives and Senate with bipartisan support last month, calls for sanctions against those responsible for the repression of the Uyghur Muslims. Sorry, my dog's barking at me and I'm losing my place. Calls for sanctions against those responsible for the repression of Uyghurs and other Muslim groups in China's Zhejiang province, where the United Nations estimates more than 1 million Muslims have been detained in camps. Jesus. The Chinese embassy in Washington repeated a prior statement noting that the bill blatantly smears China's counterterrorism and de-radicalization measures, and seriously interferes in China's internal affairs, which China deplores and firmly opposes. We urge the U.S. to immediately rectify its mistake and stop using Xinjiang, I hope I'm saying that right, Xinjiang-related issues to intervene in China's internal affairs and refrain from going even further down the wrong path, the embassy said. Ooh, chilling. The bill's progress comes amid growing tensions between Washington and Beijing over the coronavirus pandemic's origins, a recent Chinese bid to curb Hong Kong freedoms via new national security law, which involves they can arrest you if you criticize the Chinese national anthem. You can't criticize the national anthem. The national anthem sucks. Bite me. I know I'm not Chinese, and then like nothing can happen to me for saying that, but how freaking lame are you that you can't have somebody criticize your national anthem? Like, get over yourself, China. It's a song. Lucy, please go lay down. We're doing the news, pup. We urge the U.S. immediately to rectify. Oh, I already read that. China denies mishandling the outbreak. We skipped ahead. Sorry, I'm not as good at this as Edgar is. The bill's progress comes amid growing tensions between Washington and Beijing over the coronavirus pandemic's origins and a recent Chinese bid to curb Hong Kong freedoms via new national security law. China denies mishandling the outbreak and has said that the United States should stop interfering in Hong Kong and Chinese affairs. Trump said last week that he was not considering imposing sanctions on Chinese President Xi Jinping personally over Beijing's push to impose the legislation in Hong Kong. So we're doing sanctions on individual people? Someone's gonna have to explain to me how that works. It's like, yeah, we're gonna do sanctions, but it's not against you. I'm not sure he's gonna feel that way, but the Republican president the Republican president recently ordered his administration to begin eliminating special U.S. treatment for Hong Kong to punish China, and said Washington would also impose sanctions on individuals seen to be responsible for absolutely smothering Hong Kong's freedom. The Uyghur population proposed by the Uyghur legislation, sorry, I didn't know how he was going to propose a population. The Uyghur legislation proposed by Republican Senator Marco Rubio singles out Xinjiang's Communist Party Secretary Chen Quanggao, a member of China's powerful Politburo, I guess that's a political group, as responsible for gross human rights violations against them. Bloomberg earlier on Monday reported news of the bill's signing. Okay, so I'm really baffled at how we're saying we're doing individual sanctions. I don't really understand how that works, so I'm gonna have to look a little bit more into this story. I also deplore the Chinese treatment of the Uyghur Muslims. It's appalling that people are being placed into camps simply because of their religion. That's not something that I was raised to think of as a good value. China is claiming it's counterterrorism and de-radicalization, which that word just puts a chill to me, especially being said by the Chinese. That implies to me re-education in those camps, which I can't imagine what those people are going through. And history will tell the tale of it eventually, as happens with all dictatorial powers who try to place people into concentration camps. Eventually your skeletons are going to come out of the closet. Trump saying that he's not sanctioning Xi himself is baffling to me. I'm not entirely sure how politics or how the economic systems of China work, that maybe like individual people are in charge of certain things and so you can sanction them. Or maybe he's trying to maintain some good relations with China by saying, well, we're doing these sanctions, but not against you, Xi, not against you. You're okay. We're doing it against this guy. That really seems to be how some of the political balance in China works, is that they're always appointing people to these very high positions so that they can be removed. And none of the people like in the higher offices actually have to take any responsibility for any of the like the really crappy things. I don't trust China as far as I can throw them. I have a lot of suspicions about the Chinese government and their actions. But I also feel that way about the US government. So it's like anytime the US government decides that you're violating human rights, that's starting a clock. I worry that this is starting a clock to conflict with we're gonna go I guess we're gonna go rescue the Muslims from the Chinese, however that works. But you know, that was part of the excuses they were using in Afghanistan and Iraq. It's like, oh, they make the women wear hijabs and they don't let them vote and they don't let them drive, and that's why we're going to war. Like, that's what to this day people still think, that we were involved in conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq because we were there to liberate the people. But it's never, they're never going there to liberate the people. China is our biggest both economic trading partner and economic competitor. And you know, I don't put it past the US government to try to goad China into more conflict so that we have an excuse to, that the US government has an excuse to basically do whatever they want. So anyway, that's the last news story that I have for you today. Edgar informed me that Tuesdays we do Twitter trending, so I found a bunch of really fun tweets that we're gonna go through real quick before we wrap things up. The first one comes to us from Rooftop Nico, and I'm gonna play this without comment first, and then we're gonna talk about it.
No, I'm not exactly the voice that people need to be hearing right now. In fact, I need more confirmation that this is real. I've gotten some, but I need more confirmation that this is real. Trump supporters got an email This email is for patriots only. You've been identified as one of President Trump's fiercest and most loyal defenders, and according to your donor file, you'd make an excellent addition to the Trump army. It goes on to tell them that they would get a limited edition camo Keep America Great hat. To let them know that you are the president's first line of defense when it comes to fighting off the liberal mob. I don't know if you know, Hitler made Jews wear yellow stars. This feels like the reverse of that. No, I'm not.
Wearing a MAGA hat is the reverse of the Jewish yellow star. Oh, God bless you. God bless you. This girl. This is Trump derangement syndrome on full display. I'm sorry. Saying that the slogan hats that Trump gives out to his supporters is somehow the reverse of the yellow star. And a lot of people thought that this was satire. This was not satire. She was dead serious about this. And she actually put out another video talking about how, you know, you really need to be scared about this because he's identifying who he's identifying who to protect instead of identifying who the enemy is. It was like, yeah, I don't agree with your take that the red MAGA hats are the reverse of the yellow star that Hitler made the Jews wear. But moving on. This lady is amazing. This you probably saw this already. This woman was being arrested and she was... I
don't want to be detained for no goddamn reason. Yeah, that's how the fuck I act.
So she came up with this
Naturally,
song.
Ask anybody who know me. What you in school for? The fuck are you talking about?
Go.
Why are you detaining me? You about to lose your job. You about to lose your job. Get this dance. You about to lose your job because you are detaining me for nothing. And you're detaining me for nothing. And you about to lose your job.
So this went viral. It's hilarious. This woman is like obviously a lot of fun, but also she is homeless and she's struggling with drug problems. And she said that oftentimes these viral videos, they are sort of like taking somebody in the worst moment of their life and putting it on display. And so we all get it to laugh for a minute, but it's basically like the worst thing that's happening to this person and everyone in the world is seeing it. So, you know, it's not great. But this woman, the story with her is that she actually managed to reconnect with her family because of this video going viral. I guess they've realized what a terrible position this woman is. You about to lose your job. It was hilarious. Don't get me wrong, it's hilarious. They did an auto tune of it, and I love her standing up to the cops. Like, I love his face while he has to stand there and endure this woman singing at him, "You're about to lose your job." But anyway, so she was able to reconnect with her family. They're getting her help. This story actually seems to like be having a positive turn. It is a bad woman. It is a bad moment in this woman's life. That's basically being filmed and then being spread out for everyone in the world to see. But because of it, her family has reconnected with her and she's probably going to have access to be getting the help that she needs and things like that. So I wanted to point this out, not to make fun of her, but to point out that it's actually a positive turn to the story. And I'm really happy to hear that. I wish the best of luck to her. I don't know her name. They're just saying the woman in, you know, this video. But if she's able to escape homelessness and drug addiction because of this viral video, then yeah, great. The internet's awesome. This one's so great. So Samantha Davis at Blue Daisy 90, which is an account that no longer exists on Twitter, tweeted to Eric July, who they were arguing about the George Floyd protest, says, "You should shut your mouth and let Black people talk right now. The only thing you should be doing is listening." This is Eric July. This is who she said this to. Eric July needs to shut his mouth and let Black people talk. Okay, liberal white lady. Do we not have enough liberal white ladies telling people what to do? I mean, go home, Karen. Delete your account. Oh, you already did. Delete your account, Karen. Like, this is terrible. Why don't you, before you start self-righteously popping off at the mouth to people about what they need to do and who they need to listen to, maybe you need to listen. Maybe you should have figured out that Eric July is a black man, not only a black man, but a man who's been railing against the police state and the abuse of power for as long as I've been following him on Twitter. You should shut your mouth, says Samantha Davis to Eric July, and let black people talk right now. The only thing you should be doing is listening, dude. Okay, Samantha. Her account, her entire account is gone, but I'm sure after everything blows over, she'll be back, and then I'll get to harass her too. So that'll be fun. So yeah, I really just think that it's important for people of every kind of makeup to listen to one another. And there isn't a lot to be gained from telling people that they shouldn't, participate in a conversation. Whether you're a cis woman talking about womanhood in regards to transgender issues, or you're a black man trying to talk about the issues facing black men, I mean, you're allowed to have a voice in the conversation. The part of having the discussion is listening to the opinions of people you don't necessarily disagree with. And I'm not saying that you should always be trying to find common ground with everybody, or that every discussion can find a peaceful resolution. It can't. But when you cut yourself off to not even listen to people, it's you're the one stopping the discussion at that point. Anyway, that's wrapping it up for today. We did the Twitter trending. We did the news stories. If you guys want to head over, this program, Contemporary with J. Edgar, is part of the Freedom Scoop Network. If you want to pop on over there for all of your freedom news needs. Part of the Freedom Scoop Network is the Generational Gap, Stephen Ignoramus, Wyatt Birkenhoff. That I spelled Wyatt. I spelled your name the right way the first time when it was told to me. I spelled it right. I just want you to know that. The R-Rated Conservative, and the Freckles and Brett Show, my favorite. So go on over to Freedom Scoop and check them out. I am going to be here tomorrow. I'm sorry about that. But after that, Edgar will be back from his vacation, as long as Hurricane Cristobal doesn't blow him away, and things will be back on a regular schedule. I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me today, and I hope you'll come back